everyone, and welcome to the Entrepreneurs in a Game podcast. Today, I am delighted to welcome Carl Utter along to the show. He is wonderful. He's interviewed me. We had an absolute ball, and I'm so pleased to invite him back to my podcast. He is the author of The 800-Pound Guerrilla Sales. He's a consultant. He's a sales coach, a trainer, a leading sales development initiatives. He's been leading them for the last 25 years. He is at the forefront of everything to do with sales, and he has so much experience and knowledge. And I'm really, really looking forward to picking his brain to find out how he incorporates mindset, what he's doing with his inner game to have all this success that he has. And I think he's going to share some amazing stuff with us today. So please give a very, very warm welcome to Carl. Carl, welcome. Yay.
Hi, Nina. It's great to be here. I'm excited to be a guest on your show. And I know we're going to have a really fun half hour. Whenever I'm around you, I can't stop smiling. So that's a good thing.
That's great. I'm really pleased to hear that. So, Carl, you are a sales expert, and you've obviously been honing your skill over many, many years. How did you get into sales?
So, Nina, that's a great story because I did it absolutely backwards. I was a musician who was doing very well. I was making very good money. I was teaching. I was doing sound. I had couple bands I was in, and I was making really good money. And my father came to me one day, a man who I look up to, and said, it's really time that you get, a 9-to-5 job, and it's really time you kind of grow up. And so I went from being a thriving musician to a starving salesperson. So I tell people I did it backwards.
Yeah, normally it's the other way around.
Yeah, usually it's the starving musician, right? No, I became the starving because my father said I'd be good at sales. And in fact, I think I still hold the record. I worked for an insurance company selling insurance door to door, first job. And I hold the record. It took me 2.5 days to get out of the car at my first stop. The door was welded shut. I was frightened half to death. I was, I kept driving around the block hoping I'd work up the courage to get out and go knock on that door. And man, it almost killed me.
So you got into sales. You were frightened.
Yep.
I imagine, it was a slow start, finding out how to start having conversations, get people to say yes. How did you become good at it?
Training. And, I stumbled into the world of NLP, and NLP just opened up a lot of, it just really opened up the whole self-development world to me. I remember, taking my first training. I was like, I could care less about self-development. I want to learn these skills, and then you start to realize that, it's all self-development. So I was fortunate. I had some really good trainers. I had read, oh my goodness, probably about 250 books on sales. I started working my way up into management. I remember I was selling aerial photography. And I took over. New York State had 3 managers above me, so there was no room for promotion. So they gave me a little state of Vermont, which we have cities in New York bigger than Vermont. And within 6 months, I had the state of Vermont outproducing the entire state of New York. So
wow.
They quickly jumped me over all the managers, and I was leading a team of about 30 people at that point.
How exciting. So you really turned things around in sales, which is I think it's one of the most challenging parts of being an entrepreneur, being in sales. And I know from working with clients that this is the piece that they find pretty difficult because we will hate rejection and getting a no.
Yep. Well, no, and you have to reframe how you look at that, talking about mindset, right? So you have to reframe that a no is a very big part of the process. And we say that there's really 4 positive outcomes of a sales call: a yes, a no, a clear future, and a referral. And no is the second best option. To me, what's worse than a no is a maybe.
Mm.
Because the maybe, we put energy into maybe, we put time into maybe, and what we don't see is oftentimes is the writing on the wall that this is a prospect that's being very non-committal. They string us along because probably either they may think they want to use us down the line, or they don't want to hurt our feelings. You know, it's funny when we enter into the sales process with a buyer, we start this dance, and I call it the buyer seller dance, and it's a dance. And what happens is, in the mind of the prospect, you are a salesperson trying to sell them. So there's automatically a stigma and a defense that goes up. And as the process begins to move along, you become human to them. And although they are not necessarily ready to move forward and make a commitment, they start to feel guilty because you are a human, right? So it starts, and I say, my famous saying is, sales is an antiquated activity that you really can't sell anybody anything. However, if you have a good process, a good system, you can influence the buyer and you can influence the buying process. But you can't sell anybody anything. The key is to get out of the way and let people buy.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. No, not trying to sell someone something, but just it's having a conversation, isn't it? Finding out what they really need and whether you can help them. So you went from, at the beginning, being scared to get out of your car, to go and talk to someone, to leading a thriving sales team. How did that happen? What was the process in terms of your thinking, your inner game, to make that possible for you?
Goals, having a goal, and having a desire to, and confidence. As I started to have success, my confidence grew. And the more my confidence grew, the bigger my goals got. And the bigger my goals got, the harder I worked and the smarter I worked and the more I wanted to learn. So the more I learned, the more I earned, and the bigger my goals got.
Okay, so that sounds like a really great process. But so I'd sort of drill down. So the beginning, you were finding it really difficult to do the selling and you were penniless and all the rest of it. So what clicked for you?
Well, I back in the 80s, I got a hold of, one of my managers was doing a program. It was called it was by a sales trainer named Tom Hopkins, and it was The Art of Selling Anything. And I would come home every night and I would put a tape into my little tape deck and get my little pad of paper out, notes, and I would just take all these, and I would just study it and study it and study it. And then I'd go out in the next work and I would take my notes with me the next day and I would look for opportunities to apply it. And then, and so I would spend a whole week on just trying to get better at one technique. And then the next week I would pick another technique and work on that. And of course, as I did my NLP training, I learned a lot more about bonding and rapport. And ultimately what I discovered was that what I most needed was already within me. And, I already had a certain genuineness to me. At least that's what I've been told by others. I never thought of myself as genuine, but when you start to hear that a few times, you start to step back and go, yeah, maybe I'm a pretty genuine guy. And that letting that genuineness come through, I think really lowered that resistance and got people to open up. And we started having not sales conversations, but like you just said, having real conversations. Do you have a problem? Is it a problem you want help solving? And do you have the wherewithal to pay for that? And if the answer is no, there's no sense dragging you kicking and screaming through some process you don't want to go through. So for me, I think the big breakthrough came when I made a commitment to, you think about a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, they go through all this training, right? This education. Sales is probably the only profession you can get into with no experience, no education, and no knowledge. In other words, if you can fog a mirror, you can have a job. So I realized pretty quickly that if I wanted to do well, I was going to have to educate myself and train myself and make an investment in myself. And I have spent, I would dare say, I don't even want to know how much I've spent on I'm still spending money on developing myself, much to my wife's displeasure sometimes. But, I think, you always have to sharpen the axe.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is that it's getting mastery of a skill, and you kept adding another little part to it, and then layering that with another part and layering it with another part until you started to get results, and then the results spurred you on and caused more motivation for you to carry on, get bigger goals, and smash those and go on to bigger goals as well. So for any listeners and viewers who are struggling with sales calls right now, and they will put them off, or when they get into the sales call, they'll wobble like mad, particularly around pricing, that point of the conversation where they have to say their price. They hate getting no's. They don't know maybe how to deal with objections. And, they get off the call and they just feel terrible. They feel that they've done a terrible job, and, it's going to be really hard to sell any of their services. How can they start thinking about sales in a different way, in a more empowering way?
So to me, it was always been that we're not judged on how many times we try and fail, right? But we're judged on how many times we succeed, and failure is part of success, right? There was a great movie with John Denver. It was called Oh God, and he meets God, and God says, you can't have an up without a down. You can't have a right without a left, right? You can't have good without bad, right? So you can't have success without failure. And, failure is part of the game. And, having a system, for me, one of the greatest things for me was having a system. It's like people would give me advice, and it was like, the metaphor I use is golf. Well, how do you play golf well? Well, you go out and you hit the ball straight. It's like, okay. So with sales, it was like, well, go out and get in front of more people and get more yeses. And I'm like, no, there's got to be more to that. So when I started to learn a system or systematic approach, I had a feedback mechanism which would allow me to learn. And I was taught by my mentor that you have to fail your way forward. And it took me a long time to really get the full meaning of that. Meaning that if you fail your way forward. If you fail and you fail to learn, then you're learning. If you're failing to learn, you're learning to fail. So by failing and having a way of looking back and say, okay, what could I have done differently? So having a systematic approach gave me at least a way of doing things differently and looking back going, yeah, right there, I could have asked more questions around the problems they were having. Or, I probably should have asked them about money before I started writing my proposal. I should have asked about other decision makers, and I really didn't. And, I should have asked, so you would always go in and find out what you didn't do so that the next time you were in that situation, you knew exactly what to do differently.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And what about really standing in your value and knowing without a doubt that whatever you're charging is really very little compared to the value you're going to be providing for a prospect, because the value part gives the confidence, doesn't it? If you're so sure about what you do, you own your expertise in that call, you can help that person, then that really makes everything much easier, doesn't it? But it's the wobbling around the value part that can really fool so many entrepreneurs.
Yep. You're absolutely right. We use the thing called what I call the closing triangle. Like, to be a good closer, there's really three pieces to your value, and that's having the confidence that you can deliver. It's also having the commitment that you're willing to do what it takes to get the results you want around your goals. And then finally, the thing that in the emotional impact, when you stand in your value, it gives you the conviction to have that emotional impact on the person you're communicating with. And ultimately, 93% of all communication is nonverbal, right? So that's where that gets communicated, is when you do stand in that value and with absolute certainty, unshakable confidence, and an absolute commitment that I'm going to follow my process and do what it takes. And I don't believe, I never set a goal to make a sale. I've never had a goal to make a sale. My goal is always to get a decision, and no is a perfectly acceptable decision. And I tell people right up front, look, at the last thing I want you to do, Nina, is to ever make a decision that isn't in your best interest. The purpose of our conversation today is to figure out, you and I, if this is in your best interest. If it is, we should probably move forward. If it's not, we should part friends. You okay with that? Great. There's a third thing that could happen. And you may want to go off and think about this for a while. And can we agree that making no decision is probably a waste of both of our times? So I'm okay with yes. It happens to be my favorite answer. Mm-hmm. But I'm just as okay with no if you don't think this is in your best interest. Would you be okay telling me that? So that's really hard for my clients to do when we first start out. They hear that and they go, they love the idea of being able to do that. And then they go to do it and they get weak in the knees. So we have to help them build that muscle, and work up to that. So I always show them, this is where we're going, but let's start from where we are and let's build that, because there's a mindset that goes with that. There's a mindset. That mindset is, I'm okay with yes. I'm okay with no. I don't want to waste my time with a maybe. No for now is perfectly fine.
That's really powerful, because that takes away the fear of getting a no.
And it takes away the fear that we're going to try and close you or storm on, whoever tells you can say no, right? You enter into a sales process. I'm going to tell you right in front, you can say no. You can say yes. If it's a good fit, I hope you do. If it's not a good fit, I wouldn't say yes either. But we got to make we got to make a decision. There's got to be a decision, if we're going to play this, if we're going to enter into this dance, right? We got to figure out either an exit strategy, how we're going to get out of this dance, or we're going to go to the next level.
Brilliant. I love it. So how do you get that mindset of it being okay to have a no?
Because I realized that when you're not okay with a no, it was just too much pressure. It was too much pressure on me. It was too much pressure on my prospects. It wasn't effective. It wasn't efficient. I was getting, I used to call it, I could tell my wife, she said, how'd it go? I went, great. And she'd say, well, it's a Friday afternoon. I go, yeah, I think we can order the lumber for the deck. Let's start building that deck. This is going to be a big sale. 6 weeks would go by and they would fall off into that black hole of, back in those days, it was voicemail jail.
Yeah.
So, it was, so I learned that in a sales call, if I'm emotionally involved in the call, emotionally involved in the outcome, I hear what I want to hear, not what's being said. Or more importantly, and this is probably a next level skill, is learning to listen for what isn't being said.
That sounds intriguing.
Yeah, because, people will say things, right? And we make it mean what we want to make it mean, right? And so if I want that yes, I'm going to make it mean, okay, well, I'm not getting a check today, but gee, that sounded pretty good. It's like, and I learned one day, I watched my mentor and he said to a guy, he said, George, I'm not hearing you say that I'm going to be getting a check on Monday for you and I to get started. And the guy goes, well, Monday, he goes, let's talk about what isn't being said. And that just like ding, 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 ding. So people love to be non-committal. We talked about how they don't want to, we become human. They start to like us. If you're if you're a professional, you're good at what you do, people will start to gravitate towards you. So,
Yeah. I think you touched upon something really amazing, which I've never heard before. And that's learn to listen for what's not being said. Because the prospect will be holding back on some stuff. Maybe they don't want to hurt our feelings. They don't want to say, well, actually, I don't believe that you can help me. So I can't afford it, or I haven't got time, or I'll think about it. So we get fobbed off with one of these excuses, which isn't normally the real excuse, but they don't want to hurt our
that's
feelings.
right.
What they're really thinking. So
Right.
if we can ask with respect, with integrity, well, let's talk about what's not being said. That's
Right.
really powerful, because
Yep.
that means you're not scared to hear the truth.
And what you just said is thank you, because I think that's what I've been searching for with your remember folks, this is Nina. She has a superpower that she digs deep. I love that, by the way. When I was writing up your bio for digging deep, Nina has a superpower. She digs deep. I love that. Yeah, it's about the truth. It really is, getting to what's real. One of my favorite books was Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play by I'm trying to remember his first name. It was Kalasha. I believe that's an Indian name, and he wrote a book, Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play, and that's exactly right. It's let's get real about what's going on here. I'm not in the entertainment business, although my podcasts are. But when you're on a sales call, it's selling is it's about business, and not necessarily about making friends. And I don't care if somebody likes me or not. I care that they respect me. And that's a different mindset. It's a much different mindset. Too often people think that the way to make a sale is to befriend the customer. And it's not. It's not. What happens is you get led around, and you get a lot of long sales cycles and very non-committal prospects. So I really don't care that the prospect likes me. I very much care that they respect me. And sometimes that means having the hard conversation, asking the tough question. You're not going to hurt my feelings. You cannot hurt my feelings. My feelings are not up. They're not for sale. They're not up for grabs. My identity is not wrapped up in your approval. So, there's a hardness or a wall that needs to go up, that things like rejection and things like no's and stumbling our toes and not getting to where we want to be, is you can't let that stuff in. You can't let that into your inner. It can't become part of your inner game, right? Your inner world. That's got to be. That you've got to develop that defense system to block that stuff out. It's okay to let the good stuff in, but keep the bad stuff out, because that stuff gets into your identity after time. And then what starts to happen is the marketplace starts determining your value instead of you determining your value. And you talk about standing in your value. That's something you've got to wrap that around you. You've got to know what your value is. You've got to believe in it and have the conviction. And you oftentimes you've got to sit with that, because the marketplace should not determine your value. You should determine the value you bring to the marketplace. And if we let failure and we let rejection and we let those no's come in and affect us, in essence, what we're doing is we're letting external sources determine our internal value.
Yeah, very profound. And I 100% agree that we let other we want other people to validate us, approve about us, so that we feel valued, liked, loved. But it's not for other people to ever do that, is it? It's the value that we bring from internally. That's the true value. And it can never be bartered with. It can never be negotiated. It can never be swapped for something else. It's inherent within us. And so often, if we have a sales conversation that ends with a no, we think, well, I'm a failure. This means I'm a loser. This means I'm rubbish at this. And we
Mm,
take it so personally,
yep. Yep.
especially when we're selling coaching services because we feel we're selling ourselves.
And and we do take it personally, and I mean, and then it erodes our confidence, it erodes our sense of value, it erodes our sense of self, and then we just dismiss it as we don't like it, so we don't try. And it's and people ask me all the time, are salespeople made, or are they made, or are they born? And I really don't know the answer to that. I think there are some people that are just born with that gene. They really are. I have seen people who have no business being good at selling learn to be good at it. I've worked with a number of engineers, just some really brilliant people that preferred to be behind the scenes, but out of necessity they had to learn to sell, and they did. They adopted a system, they adopted a process, and they put it into practice. So but yeah, I mean, I love the saying, and even in your own work you do with people, here's a great saying: is nothing happens to a salesperson does their job, right? So if I don't, if the salesperson doesn't sell, that means the customer service people don't have a job, right? The people who deliver the products or services, the delivery people don't have a job. The trains don't run. Gas doesn't get used, so it goes right down the line. In the Zen world, we say we're all connected, right? Well, nowhere is it more true than in the sales world, because there's a lot of people out there counting on you to go out and be successful selling.
Yeah. And not least of all, because you're providing so much value to your clients solving their problem.
Yep. And you provide, and then right down the line, there's a lot of people counting on you, right? So we're all, so you're adding a value far beyond the value you're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So what would be your number one, your top sales tip?
Top sales tip. So the top sales tip is to shut up, stop talking. If you're telling, you're not selling, we say. So develop a really good questioning strategy. One of the things I work with a lot of, I don't know why, in the last month, painters have been coming out of the woodwork to work with me, like 10 of them in the last month. I don't know where this came from. Probably came from one person I helped. But so one of the things we're doing right off the bat to fix their sales calls is coming up with their 10 power questions. What 10 questions must you ask on every sales call? And hopefully they're strategic in nature, but ask questions.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
And then, and it's not the question, but it's the question behind the question. Like how to go deeper, right? It's the same thing. Is I think the way you differentiate yourself is by asking enough questions to get to the root cause of somebody's problem. Instead of dealing with symptoms, you're going to deal with it at a root cause, and that's going to separate you from everybody else.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and I completely agree that being just listening rather than talking gets you so much more out of every conversation, not just a sales conversation. So, Carl, how can our listeners and our viewers find out more about you and your amazing work?
So there's a few ways they can. One is our website, which is www.carlswayworks. I believe in going bold, as you can probably tell by my name, right? The 800-pound gorilla. I was a good salesperson. I took some time off. I came back, reopened my business, and the world had changed. And I realized that you have to be a marketer now, not just a salesperson. So, I couldn't even get people to answer the phone anymore. It's like, wow, I was blown away. So I had to eat a lot of my own advice. So we have an ebook there, and in the ebook and what we do with our clients, just so you know, is really we help them in 3 areas. Number one, lead generation. There's nothing worse than having a salesperson that has that closes 100% of the people he gets in front of, but he can't get in front of anybody. All right. So lead generation and sales need to work hand in hand. And then I work a lot with the business owner, and I have what's called our profit before expense model, which real simply we kind of flip the script on that, where we say in traditional business, sales minus expense equals profit. We go, nope, sales minus profit equals expenses. So we work with the business owner after we help them increase sales. We don't want to see that going to all their vendors. We want to show the owner how to keep more of what he's bringing in. So that's the 800-pound gorilla model. We teach it online. We teach it one-on-one, and we teach it in groups, small groups.
Terrific. We will put the links on the page where the call will go up. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much. It's been such a great conversation. And I've learned so much about sales, and I thought I knew quite a lot anyway. And thank you so much for being so open and sharing so much of your experience and your expertise. And for everyone who's listening, watching, I would really recommend you go and look at Carl's stuff, because he's superb at what he does, and he's got so much integrity and authenticity in how he does sales. Thank you so much for joining us today. Till next time, bye-bye for now.